Hello and welcome to Chapter 1 of your Sexuality textbook. This is Dr. Lisa Moyer, and I will be recording some of your PowerPoints, if not most of them. Some of them can be rather complex, so I may add a voiceover for those different ones. Introduction to sexuality, we first have to discuss what sexuality is. The word sex actually has two meanings, as you may already know. Biological sex, which can refer to whether one is male or female, or genital contact, sometimes referred to as intercourse, or other words that we have in our language for intercourse. Sexuality itself is emotional, intellectual, and physical in the way that we are attracted and the way we express our sexuality. Human sexuality is biopsychosocial because it has four different aspects. There is anatomy, our body parts, physiology, body sensations, reactions, fluids, etc. Psychology, our own thoughts, reactions, and behaviors. And then there are several social influences or institutions that affect our sexuality as well. The first main social influence on sexuality, of course, is the family. So children learn about affection, they learn about communication, they learn about relationships, they learn about the expression of sexuality, they learn whether it's okay to talk about sex or not okay to talk about sex. All those early messages that children receive affect their sexuality throughout their life. Then once children are introduced to peers, peers also have an influence on sexuality. Many times, children are mimicking what their peers say or do. Most people would say the first time that they heard any information about sex came from a peer. And then the third social influence is church or religion. That kind of goes without saying, depending upon which religious affiliation one is associated with or which church they attend, what messages they receive. Certainly does have an effect on one's sexuality. Then the school. Many schools do include sexual education in their curriculum. We will learn later on that the state of Illinois does not require a sex ed curriculum, but many states do. Then there's the media, which can give us both positive and negative messages about sexuality. The legal system, which indicates what we can do legally and what we can't, what is against the law and what is not. For example, it's against the law in every state to commit rape. The economy, and so how well people are doing. In general, when the economy is more affluent, people in the United States have access to more information about sex. They also are able to engage in many different types of activities, including dating. They can also purchase things that enhance their sexuality, etc. And then there's culture. And of course, one's culture affects how sexuality is expressed or discussed or talked about, whether or not it's taboo, etc. Societal norms and sexuality, as I just indicated, culture has a huge part or an effect on one's sexuality. And so there are really how you determine whether or not something's natural or unnatural, normal or abnormal. There are different ways of doing that. You will have an activity later on this semester that looks at norms and values. But for now, we're going to look at how scientists and how experts determine normal or abnormal. So there's actually 5 methods for determining whether or not something is normal. There is subjectively normal, which refers to things that are similar to us. Any behavior that we consider similar to our own, we consider normal. Then there is also statistically normal, which is used very often by sexologists. Behaviors that are more common or average. And so, is it average for people to engage in oral intercourse or making out? Statistics show us that most people do throughout their lifetime engage in these activities, so they are considered statistically normal. Then we have Idealistically normal, what is ideal? So this is really more of a what we would like to be. Right now, the country is focused a great deal on abstinence and promoting abstinence among adolescents. And so ideally, we would like to believe that our adolescents don't engage in sexual intercourse until they're married. Then finally, culture again comes into play, what is considered culturally normal. So most of us do use this definition depending on where we were raised or what we know or what our culture considers normal. But not every culture has the same definition of normal, of course. In some cultures, it actually is considered normal to place a dead fish in a woman's vagina before cunnilingus, which is the technical term for oral intercourse on a woman, is normal. So I know that doesn't sound normal maybe to you as you're listening to this PowerPoint, but in some cultures it is. Then we have clinically normal. This is using data, scientific data from research about health and illness. Anything is considered normal if it doesn't cause poor health or result in somebody becoming either mentally or physically ill. And so it is clinically normal, basically, if there are no harmful effects to the individual or to other individuals. A good example of this is homosexuality, which was removed from the Diagnostic Statistical Manual as an illness in 1973, I believe, because homosexual patients were actually well-adjusted. The issue that many were having was more about how society was treating them, how family members were treating them, and any of those harmful side effects were actually coming from the outside or external factors, not because of the fact that they were homosexual. There are 8 major social changes that have occurred throughout the past 20 or 30 years that have affected sexuality. The first one is the normalization of premarital sex. So it's actually considered pretty normal to engage in sex before marriage in this day and age. People aren't quite as shocked as they were, say, in the 1950s. The availability of contraceptives. Now we have a plethora of contraceptives. There are many options. We'll talk more about that later on this semester, about how you go about choosing contraceptives, but there are many choices available for both men and women, and so we have greater control over whether or not we're ready to become pregnant. The third social change is the greater acceptance of interethnic sexual relationships. Still is a little disconcerting for some families, depending on what their beliefs or their values or their culture. But generally, we do accept in this society interethnic sexual relationships. It's not as taboo as it once was, nor is it illegal as it once was. Finally, the greater awareness of homosexuality and bisexuality. We have a lot of examples of this on our television, in movies, on books, etc. We're much more aware of sexual orientation and examples of homosexual or same-sex relationships and bisexuality. Then we have increased awareness regarding coercive and violent sexual behavior. So it's not shocking now to know that partners do abuse one another, that they can try to control each other, or one another. Usually this control occurs in one direction, one partner controlling the other, and violent sexual behavior, so forcing sex, forcing somebody to do something they're not comfortable with, etc. Number 6, the 6th social change is global prevalence of fatal sexually transmitted infections. Used to be called sexually transmitted diseases. Now we refer to them as STIs because a disease always has symptoms as part of its protocol or how you define it, but sexually transmitted infections do not always have symptoms. We'll talk more about that later. For example, HIV has changed the way we view sexuality. Safe sex is highly promoted. People are aware that they can actually contract an STI that can kill them. Mass media, primarily the internet, has made a big difference on sexuality throughout the United States. We are much more aware children, adolescents today are growing up with a lot more knowledge about sex than we ever had as children ourselves, which of course influences what we know and what we do. And then the economy, once again, so increased affluence throughout the years. The economy has dipped and gone down. We have been through a recession in recent years, which also affects sexuality. And a really easy example I tend to give students is when you're wanting to spice things up, if you have the money, you can go to Victoria's Secret and purchase something for yourself or your partner that is a little sexy and might help put someone in the mood. But if you don't have the money to do that, that's not an option in your relationship. That's just one example. Moving on to sexology, or the study of sex. What that involves, there are basically three components: research, education, and therapy. This is a very multidisciplinary study of multidisciplinary, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, and I don't want to record this over. But what I mean is that the study itself involves several disciplines. So biology, chemistry, medicine, psychology, sociology, theology, and anthropology. And so you'll see many of these areas will have, for example, in a college campus, you could have sex ed offered in all of these different disciplines, and they all have different approaches. The scientific method for studying sex, it's the same scientific method that applies to every discipline. This isn't unique to just sex. There are several ways to go about studying sexual behavior. One of the easiest ways for scientists is to study species or animal behavior. So many times a lot of what we know comes from observing mice, monkeys, animals in their natural habitat. We watch what they do and we determine whether or not something is normal or abnormal lots of times based upon whether animals do it. The second way, of course, is surveys. Very common to gather opinions, attitudes, and behaviors. The third is through observation, so watching people or animals in a natural setting or in a laboratory. Then we have experiments, where typically there's at least one control group and one treatment group. The control group receives no interaction. They're not messed with. It's just a control group to make comparisons to. And then the treatment group receives whatever treatment is under consideration. Excuse me. Oh my God. Okay. Some of my personality will come through in these PowerPoints, I guess. Okay, then number 5, interviews. So we conduct interviews in person, on the phone or online. That can either be through electronic surveys or actually using email. Historical accounts just refers to looking at the past, what people have done in the past. And of course that's limited to what's available. Then we have cross-cultural comparisons. So comparing across cultures, different behaviors, different opinions, different attitudes, values, etc. How do we determine what is good research? Like I said before, this is not limited to just sexology. This is the same criteria used in any discipline when you're determining good research. You first look at the researcher's credentials. So oftentimes when a researcher has a master's degree or a PhD or an MD or a degree in higher education like that, they're considered usually more, what is the word? Not ethical. They have more, oh my God, you guys, I cannot think of the word. I'm losing my mind. When you have credentials, people listen to you or take you more seriously when you do have the credentials behind your name. Also looking at a researcher's track record, have they published before or is this their first time? So the more experience they have publishing, the more, usually the better they're getting, the quality improves, etc. The sample itself, was it a large sample, small sample? Was it diverse? Was there diversity in regards to age, in regards to ethnicity, regards to gender? Was it a random sample? Were people selected because they were convenient, or was a sample done randomly selected? which of course is always going to be better. Evaluate the methods that were used. We just talked about the methods in the previous slide. Evaluate the replication. So can the study actually be done again? And would you get the same types of results? Theoretically, it's good research if you can conduct the study again, following what somebody did before, exactly everything they did, which is why you write that all up in an article, and you should get the same results. If you don't, there's something flawed with either the theory or the methods. Examine the impact of the research, meaning is it published in a reputable journal, or was it presented at a professional conference? Is it received well by others in the discipline? So that concludes the information I wanted to portray to you in your first PowerPoint for the week. And I also wanted to bring your attention to these internet resources for sexuality. These are 4 really reputable, accurate, and easy to access and understand resources. The Kinsey Institute is fantastic. All of them are, actually. But if you're looking for statistics about sexuality, or you're looking for more information about sexuality, these are good places to go. I thought I'd share them with you. And that is all. I'm sure you'll get sick of my voice. This is strange for me too. First time I've done this. That's all. Thanks.